Thank you. And just to continue down here, and is my screen sharing on your side? I'm gonna assume it's there. All right, so my name is Corinne Bissett. I am a technologist with Veeam Software, and I do have to update this slide. I am now officially an MVP, but I'm also an MCT. I do a ton of things out in the community. Many of those do present are around presenting, but on the flip side, I make some additional content that goes supplemental with a lot of my presentations, and you can find any of those on my link tree, along with any of my socials. I also have three lovely cats. I like to point that out because you'll probably see at least one of them coming through behind me or in front of me as I'm trying to present. And let's go ahead and get started here. There are several tools that I use in all of my presentations, depending on what I'm doing, and I like to share those out to be like, here's kind of what I do for my presentations and my recording to make it easy. I use a lot of things with textual captures and Zoom It. Zoom It is one of the low-key best tools out there on the market for anyone that's wanting to come up as a presenter, and it does screen recording. So if you need a quick screen recording of anything on your machine, Zoom It. If you have it, you click it and do a couple keys, and all of a sudden you're recording your entire screen. Then you can upload those immediately as your demos. And that's what a lot of my presentations on that link tree are associated with. There are also tons of certifications around this from Learn, so I always like to give Learn a great plug. Anytime someone comes to me being like, hey, how do I start? Where do I go? And how do I learn this new technology from Microsoft? I direct them here to see if there's anything on Learn that they can get for free. The next thing is the adoption side. I do a lot of presentations in Teams, and as we know, every time we boot up Teams, it seems something is changing in that platform. Adoption helps us keep up on some of those before they come down the line, and you don't have to be an MVP in order to see some of those new things coming out and be able to prepare ahead of time. And I also like to tell people they usually have some sort of free service if they have over 150 seats in their organization to tap into that fast track program. And last plug here is going to be for the community. We have the PNP community. I'll be showing one of the things from that I use in this presentation. And we have all of these other forums and places where other MVPs spend a lot of their time. Now, before we start just creating these projects, because as soon as we hear an issue and we get a ticket, the very first thing that we want to do is create a plan for that project. But really, what we need to do is ask some questions. What is the goal? Because sometimes what someone is asking isn't really what they need in order to satisfy that issue. So ask them, what can we do to help make this application exactly what you want to be, or this feature what you want it to be? And maybe there's something that already exists that's pre-made and we don't really need to create anything else. Then we need to set expectations. Expectations is where a lot of projects fail or get bad reputations, being like, every time I try to start something, it's never on time. Well, of course, scopes change and there's very little we can do about that. But trying to set proper expectations and get that information back. Work Chronicles is one of my favorite follows. I would recommend if you want to feel validated or the most validated by a comic you have in most of your life and you live either in the development world or adjacent to the development world, I recommend giving them a follow because they'll help you get a little bit of a break throughout your day. Now, onto the meat of the presentation. I spend a lot of times in Teams, and not just daily for my everyday tasks, for meetings and things like that, but I do a lot of content creation around Teams and trying to automate my life, put everything in one place, and there's a lot of ways to do that. And getting some of that terminology down and where it's best to put it is what we're kind of covering here. So we have applications. If you need to have files shared or if you have additional outside entities like Salesforce, you can hook a lot of those into Microsoft Teams and Outlook. What we'll be doing is a little bit more of a customization track, but check to see if your original application already has an app there and maybe pin it as a tab. I love reoccurring meetings because I will pin additional shared resources to that reoccurring meeting each time, and we can get to the same whiteboard, we can get to the same OneNote. Literally every time we're on a phone call, my boss will present an issue about being able to sync on something, and I'm adding an additional feature into our Microsoft Teams to make that a little bit more seamless. And I love doing things inside of what was Power Automate in Teams, but is now Workflows. And Workflows is just Power Automate on the back end, but it's a little bit more Teams focused, meaning these either going to send a message in a channel, create a thing on the side so you can keep track of, say, schedules and time limits. I was in a huge group meeting because we have a big group meeting every year for getting everyone synced on the same page. Well, they wanted all of us to present, and one of my boss's biggest pet peeves is to, okay, let's make sure we all start and stop on the same time. I was able to create a Power Automate directly inside of Teams to say, hey, as soon as we say start timer, let us know at the 5 minutes before, 2 minutes before, and whenever the time is done. So we're not constantly getting after that person, but they have a visual reminder. They need to wrap up their presentation so we can get through the entire day. Some of the other things that I work with inside Teams is definitely going to be Power BI. I don't use Power BI personally for figuring out how I'm going to tackle issues, but I definitely have a lot of the project manager types that I work with and management types that I work with. I give them a couple Power BI charts and their entire face lights up and they take it to a senior leadership saying, hey, this is the impact that we're having. And it takes a couple of clicks, importing a couple charts, changing a few fields depending on what I'm trying to do. And I've taken a planner from basic into senior leadership ready type of content. Power Virtual Agents is another thing. Getting your common questions answered by a help desk is nice, and getting your information right away for common types of questions. Tons of other apps, and we're going to take a look at a couple of apps inside of Teams. So let me go ahead and get Teams up here. And this is my test Teams environment. This is where I use, make, and break things so then I can take them over to the regular environment later. And we're going to take a look at some of the flows. Now, flows has kind of changed a little bit over time, and there are some legacy apps in here where you have to recreate some of the applications. So unfortunately, it's not as click friendly as we want it to be for the everyday user. So this is going to be a slightly elevated user that's getting in here right now until they clean up some of these. And I love using these templates. So one of my top templates here is actually going to be follow up on a message. I forget about messages all the time if I click on a message and click off of a message. If it's late Friday night and for some reason I'm still scrolling work and then I click off, I do not remember that message Monday. But follow up on a message has been kind of like a godsend. It's kind of like the same thing that you have whenever you get this discography from Viva saying, hey, these are the things in emails you should probably follow up on. This helps you remember. So it's really easy. Once you've initiated it, you can go to any message inside of here from any of your stakeholders, right click on any of the messages and say, hey, I want to follow up on this message through the box, and it'll become one of your extra action items. And we just click on that. It'll give us a little window saying, hey, when do you want to follow up on this message? What time do you want to follow up on this message? And a little spark note to yourself. Maybe you get, hey, give me these project notes for blah 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 status update. No one's going to care about that Friday, so I just give myself spark notes saying, hey, go ahead and present and give the access to the Power BI board and this other status update on a planner as a go-to. That way you remember when you're still waking up on Monday morning sipping your coffee. Some of the other flows I've started to play with a little bit more recently, and these are all from the templates, is notify the team when a status change. And if you notice down here, it is also one of the automatic or suggested templates. This suggested template does not work because the Planner app has changed and the Planner app required A, reauthentication, B, the Outlook and Microsoft 365 users were not the right sync and they don't flow into this team postcard right. But I did some changes to this and we can take a look at those changes to see how I got it working. So the first thing that I did was I did have to re-add the when a task is complete option. After I did that, of course, I got the task details because this gives me more information I can get back from that particular task in order to add into this card. Now, adaptive cards are low-key one of the coolest things that you can do in the Microsoft environment. You do not have to be good at creating these. There are the adaptive card IO, which we'll take a look at a little later, which makes this so much easier to figure out how to add your buttons, your actions, and then what to do with some of those actions. And we'll take a look at one of the custom flows I created to solve a very specific issue I had within my team. But it's very easy because we can create these adaptive cards and have these value fields dynamically complete by the dynamic content. And you can also create some functions above and have those converted to strings and put the strings output here. That is also completely possible. Pretty much anything you could add to dynamic content, for the most part, you can put here. Now, if you do have a character conflict, which means you may have to do some field validation so that you don't have a character conflict inside of JSON, but that's a case-by-case kind of scenario. And we can take a look at the history with this and kind of how we troubleshot down to getting here. We'll go back and take a look at that. And we can see here, the very first flow that happened, we had an issue with this get profile. I had to go through and delete this section and re-add the users so that I could get to the proper connection portal. All right, and let's go back to the main flows. And the next one I played with, or I've been working with, is the analyze email. And I thought this one was really interesting because I want to set this one up for every time my manager sends me an email. That way I can kind of get the tone of that email and the sentiment of that email prior to even starting my day. I can triage my email box step by step from the key stakeholders. This one did also require me going into Power Automate, but I didn't have to change anything. What I had to do for this one, once I added it, is just come into here, run a flow check, save it, and all of a sudden it stopped or started working. And I will also say there's not completely there yet when it comes to AI understanding sentiment, because I did some test emails to try to get it to trigger positive, negative, and neutral email types. And we can take a look at some of these flow cards that were created. The first one here is I Googled looking for a professionally upset email. And it did show that, okay, The sentiment here is neutral. Now, to me, this also presents a problem. So maybe modifying some of the triggers to be a little bit more sensitive towards the negative side. I actually even did a little bit more of an aggressively angry email, and it still called this a neutral sentiment. But in the end, I was able to do a positive email and it did a positive sentiment. So we know that there is some sort of logic that is there. We'll just have to change the sensitivity on the back end when it comes to that negativity level. Now, beyond just using everything that is built into the regular applications, we can also do some stuff with custom applications. And I really like the custom application side because you can hook this into everything. And Copilot has kind of made this a lot more accessible to the everyday user than before, because I have spent hours inside of here trying to make applications, try to make them look right, trying to make just a content delivery system. I'm able to come and say, hey, can you make me a content delivery system with these key things on this table? And all of a sudden I have a base for an app that would have taken me personally hours to get to. And beyond just making them inside of here, what really is a defining difference is you can pin them inside of Teams. I love pinning and changing the pinned applications inside of Teams for my end users. So inside of here, if you notice, these are all different than what you would expect when you first log into Teams. And right here is one of my custom applications, which is this issue tracker. Keep in mind, you do also have to follow all of the regular licensing rules when it comes to these applications. But once you have the proper license inside of Power Apps, you can hook it up and have it automatically here. And the bonus part is it can be done inside of groups. This is the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. The Teams Admin Center is where I do a lot of that customization so everyone has the applications that matter to them inside of Teams, pinned to Teams. You can check any one of your users, and I'll check myself to see what my policy is applied. And the policy that we're looking for is going to be the app setup policy. And once you get to your account, you just go to policies. You can see the policy type. So we can just go down the list until you find the app setup policy. And you can see that's going to be company A setup policy. Let's go take a look. You can either click on it here or you can go to the setup policy under Teams apps. And we'll click the setup policy and we can see the company A setup policy. But before you get that far, you can add in your custom applications first. So we'll manage the applications in this environment. You do have to allow custom applications to begin with, and you can remove any of the applications that are maybe third party that you don't want to have users to have access to from this place as well. So just to upload an application, which you do from the Power App side, export that app. When you hit new app, it'll just have you upload that. Once you've uploaded it, it'll show up in your list. And we'll take a look at one of the ones I've added, which is Issue Tracker. And you can see Issue Tracker is a custom app, and I've noted that it is one of the Power Apps I have. And I believe I also have Bug Tracker in here. Yep. Also have Bug App Tracker. These are two applications that I created in the Power App side that I'm now connecting to make easily accessible for my Teams users. Let's take a look at the setup policy. So we're going to go to the setup policy for the company A because we know that's the user I'm working with now. The first thing that you can do is add those apps. So you can add the apps up here. All this does is if you have an entire list of apps inside of Teams that you want them to already have and they don't have to go searching for, you just add them here. So you can look for the bug tracker and you just select that and hit add. Now to modify the order in which they see those apps, you actually come down here to pinned apps. You can see a lot of these are exactly the way and what I'm seeing inside of my personal Teams account, and I didn't have to reorder or do anything with these. There's two ways to enforce this policy. One of them is to have this as the initial policy and then allow people to change it, but you can also lock it down so that it stays this way. That way, if you have users that may lose their ticketing system quite often, you can force pin it so they're not able to accidentally move it off of the screen. Keep in mind a lot of resolutions, a lot of laptops that you're on, they will only allow probably 5 to 7 apps on the left-hand side before they all spill off into that little waffle icon. So try to make your most important apps the first 5 to 7 apps that you have pinned on this list. And that's what we took a look at now, pinning those apps. And now adaptive cards. Adaptive cards are actually my favorite thing that I use in the Microsoft Teams side because they are so versatile. You can also have adaptive cards in so many other parts of the ecosystem. If you ever see a pop-up and it looks pretty and you either put in a little bit of information or you're able to get a status update and it's in this little box, it's likely that you've worked with an adaptive card, even if you didn't know that you were familiar with adaptive cards. So the first thing whenever you're wanting to work with these, you need to know what is my use case. So it doesn't need to be super visually appealing. Do I need to put a lot of time into this graphic, or does it need to be simple and this little teeny, here's a status message, here's what you need to go, and we move on. Once you figure out the kind of card you need, it's really just a matter of coming to the right repository and say, hey, this looks like close to what I want. Then take that and make it into what you want. There's a ton of them in the PNP side. There's a few over on others. Like you go in and you can find adaptive cards close to what you want. Once you have something close to what you want, you then just have to use the adaptive card designer. So I love this because it has a few that you can start with, or you can just hop right into the designer and say, I want to modify these things. You can copy something over from our earlier example we can take a look at. So we'll go back into Teams, and we know that there was an adaptive card sent for some of these workflows. One of the workflows that is let me know when something happens inside a planner. And we'll click on here, we'll edit this flow, and we can see the adaptive card that got posted to this channel. We'll copy this text over into the designer and maybe see if we want to modify anything. Now we can see here where it says empty text box and the trigger output bodies. Whenever we copy over from the Power Automate side, it will give us the little text boxes that were associated with those dynamic content strips. We could add some buttons. We can decide where this view task is going to look like. Maybe we want it bigger, smaller, bold, whatever it might be. And it's possible we started inline editing this inside of the Power Automate environment, and for some reason it keeps saying that now it doesn't work. For whatever reason it might be, you can paste it into this designer and it'll tell you where a lot of those faults might occur. One of the big things the designer tells me, and a lot of the forums have it, is it likes all of these to be lowercase. I haven't seen it matter much in the Power Automate side, but it automatically let me know that that's not really correct formatting for this. And then we got to figure out how we want to deliver that card. There's a couple ways to deliver cards. You can either do this as a post within like a channel, you can do it within private messages, or you can do this wherever makes sense and by whatever trigger makes sense to your specific project. My project that I end up doing in order to get familiar here was to post a survey. I was tasked with a senior level executive on our team in a group meeting to post out a, hey, let's do a survey for our company meeting and who wants to do what kind of activity. Who wants to maybe do a hike or go food tasting or whatever that might be. Silly thing is the executive leader owned that meeting, and I did not have any permissions to use Polly to give out a quick survey in that meeting, which is what I thought I would be able to do. But what I found is I could create a Power Automate flow to then survey all of these end users and then get that data back to a list so that I can then just filter down, say, okay, tally this list to the bottom. Cool. This is who wants to do this. This is how many people want to do that. And this is how many people want to go bowling for those. And we can see what that card looks like. I have it here. Inside of the workflows. And we have the postcard. Now, the postcard flow that I have here is to actually post this card out to a channel. When I hit the trigger, it is a manual trigger. You could trigger this off of keywords. That's really neat whenever you're doing a group chat. Say you have a help desk organization. You could have under your help desk side a trigger that says create ticket automatically pops up this card to say, here's the information I need to create this ticket. That would then automatically send that ticket back to whatever ticketing system that you might use. But this is my adaptive card. And in this case, I used a Flowbot in order to send this to a group chat. And this is our meetup with dummy accounts. Now we can take this entire text and take a look at what the card looks like when it's going to be posted to all of those end users. And in this case, it was scheduling preferences. Do we want to schedule meetings for morning, noon, evening, whatever that might be? And I did a checkbox instead of a radial. This allowed me to have a multi-select option rather than just a select one of these options. And each person was able to submit this. Now, the reason they were able to submit on a multiple basis and get back to the same flow is by using this card ID. I have Brainstorm here as the card ID, and this is a really important piece of the puzzle because you could post this adaptive card to 12 different channels. And as long as you use the same card ID, all of that same information is going to come back to the same place for you to capture wherever you're wanting to capture that information at. In this case, I wanted to send all of this information to a list. So for each card that, or for each contract and person that came through and answered this, so anyone that said, hey, I want to meet at this time or that time, is then going to come through and let me know that it's been updated, and I send that directly to that list. All right, that was that demo there. And for the demos that I'm talking about today, I do have these recordings on that link that I provided earlier, and I'll have that same link at the end of the presentation so you can go back through and look at these a little bit more in depth. It goes from start to finish, from starting responses, collecting responses, and answering everyone. Now, adaptive cards, I said again, are not just for the Microsoft Teams environment. Once you start developing these, you'll start wanting to really implement them to a lot of other places, and that's where the fluid and flexibility really comes in place for these adaptive cards. Follow up on a message again is one of my favorite messages when it comes to the workflows. If you've never used it, I recommend trying it out. And all you have to do is go into workflows, select it. It's 2 clicks and you're done. It automatically shows up under all of your messages. Sending attachments from your email to OneDrive is one of the Power Automate flows inside of the Power Automate infrastructure templates. It allows you every single attachment that comes inside of my email automatically goes to a OneDrive folder. So every report I get, every file I get, every PDF, PowerPoint, anything that's been attached to an email is automatically there. So I never have to search through emails to try to find a single file that was sent to me. I use it to also create tickets on a back end for a help desk scenario. We work in the strategy side of the company, so they're able to give me feedback, things that they're seeing in the field, and maybe something that they saw was happening that probably shouldn't be happening, or they need talking points around that conversation, and I'm able to do that. Another thing is surveys. This is the perfect thing to collect and get actionable items from those surveys and multiple entities at the same time. It's a little bit more complicated, of course, than just sending out a poly, but you also don't need permissions in every one of the groups in order to send this out to everyone. Exporting data doesn't have to just be to something like SharePoint list. I personally like SharePoint list because it's an easy, quick way to go about it. You can send this to ticketing systems. You can send this to anywhere Power Automate allows you to send that data, which is really the key PowerPoint here. And I don't know if we had any questions as we've went along, but I'd be happy to take any questions from this presentation.
We have a question related to the license, Karen. Would you like to take it now or after your session?
I would say that I'm wrapping up the session now, so that I'd be able to answer some of those questions.
Okay. One moment, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the link that I was talking about in the link tree for anyone that's interested in that additional resource materials or looking me up from anywhere.
Awesome. Ram said, very interested to the session and they need to learn what is the license required to use Power Platform in Microsoft Teams. Is it standalone or there is a specific plans or subscription needed to use Power Automate and Power Apps inside Microsoft Teams?
So Power Apps is going to have an additional license set to them, sort of. There are some different tiers of Power Apps. It depends on what you're doing with the Power Apps, how many people are accessing the Power Apps, and then there are rules for permissions to access them with license, but there's also things in the Power Apps environment that'll let you do it without the permissions, even though you shouldn't be able to do them. I would recommend, if you're doing anything in the Power Apps side, to get with a licensed specialist, especially from Microsoft, to be like, hey, I want to make sure I'm going to be in compliance because you don't want to lose that. Now, the Power Automate side, the features that I showed you today were all a part of your e-license for access to Power Automate as a whole and an end user.